Welcome. Welcome to the September 2023 be able to be in person again today. We also appreciate that we learned a lot about technology. First one for us for a hybrid meeting, and so we are able to broadcast to a larger audience at home as well. And this will be recorded for later viewing on our website as well. So that's all very good news. So I'm Jane Powell. I'm the current lead of women voters here in the La Crosse area. And on behalf of the board of directors and all of the members, we are very happy to see so many people here today. We're also very happy to start the season with such a strong program with Rasch as our speaker today. So we'll be learning a lot about some of the nitty gritty about elections, and I expect that we'll all learn a few things. As you know, the voting rights is central to the League's mission. So I did want to share our official position statement on this topic. The League of Women Voters of Wisconsin believes that voting is a fundamental citizen right, must be guaranteed. Wisconsin election laws should provide citizens maximum opportunity for registration, voting at the polls, and absentee voting. Election administration should be adequately coordinated and funded to achieve statewide standards uniformly applied, verifiable results, and local municipal effectiveness. Now, before Leslie introduces Lee more fully, I just wanted to mention that in case you think since there's no fall elections this year, the League has been taking the summer off. But I want to assure you that not be farther from the truth. We started out right away in June, the beginning of June, and hosted the state league's annual meeting. So all 20 leagues of our state were represented. We were able to put faces with names and get to know what leagues around the state are doing. So it was a good strengthening bonding for the whole state league. Then I also have, maybe you've seen us around June, July, and August. Voter services never stops. So we started with Juneteenth tabling. We were at the La Crosse for 5 days. We were also at the Pride Disability event, the North Side Neighborhood Picnic. We've been to all 3 colleges already, meeting with back from to the fall. We've even been to Hamilton School. So you think, why do we go to school? Well, we have a new activity that we've started. Really caught on. People have really enjoyed it. The idea from Shemaya Curtis of Poker Stores. She invited us to come to the Santa program of the Boys and Girls Club in December. And she said, do something that the kids will enjoy. So Chris Haskell came up with an election between Santa Claus and deer. And so we started out and we made little ballots in a ballot box, and the kids started voting. And it was such a great activity that we expanded it, changed the election topic, but we've used it in our last several tabling events. And we know that by the numbers that we've been in contact with over 1,300 kids and their families. So the families, the parents step right in and want to know what their children are doing. We use words of election, ballot, voting, some civic education. How old do you have to be to vote? 18. So we are really starting here. The other things, and just so you know, their committees are equally busy. Education continues to be weekly and does a great job with our website and all our social media posting and our news updates. The Observer Corps team, which we rated the last couple of years, has been attending local government meetings with the school board and county level committees. So there's still an active activity with that even in the summertime. The book club is continuing to meet monthly, and there's a couple of interesting books coming up for the fall. And the membership committee has been renewing your members, your annual membership at a great rate. We appreciate everybody that's renewing, and also many new members. So really feeling well supported and strong with all of you joining us. So now I would like to remind you, oh, one more thing, the membership committee is looking forward to this next year when the League's 100th celebration is going to occur. We incorporated as a league on August 22nd of 1924, and we have the written notes from that meeting. And so this next year, as we prepare and do these celebrations to honor this, we are encouraging anybody to join our committee and help with this celebration. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We also work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influence public policy through education and advocacy. We take action on public policy positions established through member study and agreement. As a nonpartisan organization, we do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. The League of Women Voters is an organization committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and in practice as we work to perfect our union. And as I said, we remind you that today's meeting is being recorded for later viewing. After Lee's presentation, we'll take some questions in person and some chat at home and type their questions in at the bottom of the screen. And now Leslie Wagner from our program committee is speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I just wanted to introduce myself since this is my first in-person meeting. My name is Leslie Wagner. But I'm also going to take a moment just to make a quick pitch because I am succeeding Alan as our candidate forum coordinator. And as Jane mentioned, 2024 is an election year. There are 4 elections in 2024. So we hope to be involved in as many candidate forums as we can be. Hires people. And my contact information is over there on that table. I am definitely looking for people who want to join a candidate forum team. We need greeters, we need moderators, we need timekeepers, we need interested people to help. So if that's something you feel like you'd like to get involved in, please. And you'll be seeing more information, I think, in October. So now back to today's program, which I am very much looking forward to, both as a league member and as a person who serves as an election official in my small town of Vernon County. Lee Rasch has been a fixture in the La Crosse area for decades. Some of us became acquainted with Lee when he served as president at Wisconsin Technical College from 1989 to 2017. And others of us may know Lee through his band, The Executives, which has been performing together since 1997. Throughout his career, Lee has actively promoted ethical leadership development, continuous improvement, economic development, and sustainability at the national, statewide, and local levels. In 2018, he brought all that experience to bear in founding Leader Ethics, a nonpartisan organization committed to promoting ethical leadership among elected officials. It is in his role as Leader Ethics Executive Director that Lee was invited to serve as one of 12 members of the Keep Our Republic Advisory Council of the state of Wisconsin. Formation of this bipartisan council was announced in June, and in the run-up to the 2024 presidential election, they will be focused on informing the public about elections, voting rights, and the democratic process. It is incredibly important, and we're very pleased that Lee is able to join us today in person and take us on a deep dive into the topic of election security and the strategic priorities for Wisconsin's Keep Our Republic mission. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Leslie. It's great to see everyone in person. Okay. So, by the way, I'm going to give a commercial message right away. Tuesday, September 19th, Leader Ethics and the Turbo Reinhardt Center for Ethical Leadership are co-hosting a program on free speech on campus. And it's open to the public. It's at the Weber Center. And it's from 7 to 8:30. And so it's going to be a very good program. Our speaker is Alex Murray from FIRE, the Free Individual Rights for Expression. So we're all with it. Okay, let's get started. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about election integrity. And I'm representing Leader Ethics, and Leader Ethics is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that is promoting ethical leadership among elected officials. And
Oh, I'm sorry.
Slide changes.
Okay, sorry. Oops, I think it went too
And
far.
in fact, if you can go to the next
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so here's the key. We believe that ethical leaders support truthfulness, transparency with public information. They're unifiers rather than dividers, and they work to the best of their ability to represent the interests of their entire constituency. And those shouldn't be outrageous expectations for elected officials, for anyone who's in a leadership role. But in today's climate, they're a challenge. And we recognize that it's important to talk about this. It's important to encourage voters to vote with these principles in mind. But there are also barriers that need to be addressed. And for example, we are concerned that the partisan primary process in this country, and certainly in Wisconsin, is a huge barrier because individuals can be penalized. They can be primaried if they dare cross the line and work with someone on the other side of the aisle. And so you find a lot of people that are very principled people, but they're not willing to take that chance. There are other concerns about campaign finance, for example, that has practically no regulation. And so Leader Ethics has partnered with some national groups to try to also address challenges with electoral reform. We're partnered with the Democracy Found, and we support the efforts to bring final five voting into Wisconsin. We're also partnered with American Promise, and this is an organization that is working to advance a constitutional amendment to permit campaign finance reform. And we're also partnering with Keep Our Republic because there are a lot of issues that are at stake in this coming election, but it's also, there's some core challenges that are going to likely be there for some time until we as citizens can work those things through. So let's go to the next slide. And this is Keep Our Republic. They too are a nonprofit civic education organization dedicated to protecting a republic of laws and strengthening the checks and balances of the democratic electoral system. And they were founded, one of the co-founders was Dick Gephardt, former Speaker of the House. They're a national organization, but they're really focusing on, go to the next slide, they're really focusing on 3 states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Because in this upcoming election, the pressure to potentially interfere with the election in these 3 states is very, very strong. And so they came to us and invited us to support their efforts to bring people together, and I was invited to join the Wisconsin Advisory. And these are the members of the team. The key person here is Kathy Bernier. If you don't know Kathy, she is the former Republican state senator from Chippewa Falls area. She was formerly in the state assembly. She's also formerly a county clerk. And she was willing to speak out against other Republicans about a year and a half ago, basically saying that the 2020 election was legitimate. And she had plenty of reason to show that and to verify that. She was even interviewed on the 60 Minutes national TV program. And so she has a tremendous amount of credibility. And by the way, Kathy is a very straight shooter. She's a strong conservative, and she will talk openly about her positions and her values. But at the same time, she is probably the strongest advocate you could have in Wisconsin at this time. The other members of the committee, you're going to recognize names up there. Mike Kitch, former Governor Tommy Thompson, Barbara Lawton, former Lieutenant Governor, Reed Ribble, former Congressman. These are all people that are recognized and hopefully respected people in the community, in the state, and they're willing to take a position on supporting the integrity of the election in 2024. And this group, by the way, their role varies. I am not an election clerk, so if you have election type questions, I may not be able to answer them. But there are some election clerks in this group, and there are also legislators, legal minds. There are people that are trying to represent lots of different roles, because in the work that we have, there are a lot of different perspectives that are being used. Let's go to the next slide. And so these are the two areas that are our primary focus. The first is to educate, and that means to bring information out throughout the state to try to inform voters, citizens, on the electoral process, and to respond to any questions or misinformation that's out there, so that we have a better informed citizenry going into the next election. You should know that the last, this is 2022, but the last Marquette poll showed that about a third of Wisconsin citizens believe the 2020 election was stolen. And so there's a challenge that's out there in trying to get information. But and I'll talk about the education process is going around the state. The first session was held in Chippewa Falls a couple of months ago. There is another session scheduled in the Green Bay area next month. We hope to bring them here in the La Crosse region on November 15th. It's not souped yet because we need to make sure that all of the panelists are available, but that's the plan. And they'll be going around to other places in the state as well. Here's the challenge with our electoral process. Actually, it's a strength, but it's a challenge. According to the Brennan Center nationally, there are 10,000 local election officials. In Wisconsin, we have over 1,900 local election officials. 1,852 municipal clerks, 72 county clerks. Think of that. Nearly 1 out of every 5 local election clerks in the country is in Wisconsin. Now, I consider that a strength because communities do support local neighbors, people working with them in the electoral process. So if there's a potential to try to educate citizenry, it's based on trying to make sure you have local communication around and building on that network. It also is a challenge, though. You're aware of the questions that the legislature has about the administrator for the Wisconsin Elections Commission, and if there was a change there, it brings in more uncertainty about the WEC role or capabilities going into the 2024 election. And when you have that much distribution in the entire state, it puts tremendous pressure to do it right. The WEC is really key in Wisconsin, and we're very fortunate that we have Megan Wolf now, and had Megan Wolf during 2020, and have Megan Wolf now. We'll have to see how this all plays out leading up to the election. It's one of the areas, by the way, this group is trying to be a part of observing. So there's a challenge getting that information out. There are other challenges as well, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but it's a challenge to get people to think differently. And so once people have formed their opinions, it's a very difficult thing to get them to change that opinion. And there's several reasons for that. But it's also, we need to think about this in context of us as humans. Many people doubted the elections in 2016. Many people thought that there might have been some interference of the voting machines in 2016. And there were audits that were held in that year. We need to remember that. And the whole issue with the Mueller report was another issue that people were wondering if there was Russian collusion that somehow complicated the voting in the United States. And so in that regard, we need to recognize that this isn't about people that don't get it. It's about all of us. When we grab onto something and we feel that there's a reason for believing it, it's difficult to change that. So we need to just recognize that that's something that this organization needs to try to address. The second role is this issue of preparedness. And we were not prepared in November of 2020 between what happened on election night and January 6th, 2021. We were not prepared. And so we are trying to assume lots of things that can happen and issues that may evolve. And how can we inform key people, key influencers in the state to ensure that there isn't, we're not dropping the ball in the process, so that we allow for some rapid response if it's needed, or have a better informed citizenry so that we can avoid some of the things that we're doing now. We're today still working on the hangover of the issues that happened in that time period. Now, preparedness is not easy when you're not sure what's going to happen. And there are a lot of very, very concerning and highly unusual conditions that are in place in this election year. And because of that, you know, this organization, we're meeting regularly with the representatives from the other states, Michigan and Pennsylvania. We're talking about things here, and they're talking about things there. We're looking to get some ideas, suggestions, just information about what others are thinking and doing. There's also things that are happening. The conflict between the legislature and the WC right now is very concerning because at a critical time, the key people that are the decision makers, supposedly the adults in the may be involved in other political priorities. And so there's just a lot of things that can potentially transpire. I kind of look at it like the hurricane that's in the Atlantic Ocean right now, Hurricane Lee, and you see those spaghetti diagrams, you know, and a lot of kind of going out back into the Atlantic Ocean, but there's a couple that are coming and aimed at Maine and you know, parts of Canada. And so in preparing, you have to recognize maybe the odds are this isn't going to happen, but we need to talk about these things and we need to think them through so that there is a better level of preparedness, anything that could evolve. So if something were to interfere with keeping polling places open in Wisconsin, be it a natural disaster or some kind of incident, we want to talk about who makes the decision to close the polls, how the votes are processed, how you ensure those that didn't yet vote have that opportunity. Those are the things that you want to make sure the public is informed about, and the adults in the room are doing their job. So the idea of preparedness is it's an evolving role. I can't say we're going to have all of the answers because it's a spaghetti diagram. There's just lots of things that are going to unfold. But we believe that having better informed citizenry by working with media leaders, by working with legal scholars, by working with legislators, we can do a better job at being ready and responsive if and when needed. So, if we're successful, there'll be a significant increase in the people who have confidence that the 2024 election was held with integrity. So that means that Marquette poll, if they hold another one, it'd be better than the 1/3 number that we're looking at right now. And let's go to the next slide. But we need to also recognize that there are huge challenges that we're facing here, and these are not just 2024 issues. These are challenges that we're facing as a nation. There are serious threats to the integrity of our democratic republic, and so trying to make sure that there is election integrity is kind of like trying to fix this when all of these things are still happening. And so, and that's where this comes in, where we need to build alliances with lots of different people and try to work on this collectively. But our country is severely politically divided, and it's beyond politics. It's really breaking down trust. If you go to the next slide, you can kind of see how this is playing out here. This is an interesting study by Pew Research, and it showed that in 1997, nearly 2/3 of Americans had trust and confidence in the wisdom of American people making political decisions. And you see what's happened since then. It's literally flipped. Now nearly 2/3 have no confidence, little confidence. And so trying to implement things when we don't trust them or don't believe them, or don't believe that the motive, the intent of these other people is right, is going to be a huge challenge. We can't bring people together on the political divide if people are isolating separate camps. Just can't do it. So we've got to have larger, longer term things that we're willing and able to do to try to bring people together to be better able to listen, respect different values and positions. So the next slide. This is also showing how this plays out against major institutions, and this is really interesting too, because we think of trust. This is all politics. I mean, Congress is down there at the very bottom. Practically no one has trust and confidence in that. But that line there, all of these organizations, the medical system, religion, public schools, organized labor, banks, large tech, Supreme Court, presidency, newspapers, criminal justice system, big business, TV news, Congress, less than a third have trust and confidence. That means that all of that on this side here is that they have some little or no trust in institutions. Now let's go to the next slide. And this is the 2020 graph, and this is the same information in 2021 and 2022, the most recent now. And in every area, trust has gone down in just the last couple of years. The only exception was organized labor, was held status quo. So think about this. If you owned a manufacturing concern and you were producing product and you couldn't get the raw materials that you need to produce that product, it would be a huge concern. These institutions, for them, trust is the commodity. Trust is what keeps their livelihood, their business, their enterprise going. And so when you see a breakdown in trust, and it's in these areas, we should be very, very concerned. Let's go to the next slide. And a big part of this is disinformation. This is data from 2016, 2017, but it's very interesting because it's very telling about the challenges that we have dealing with disinformation. So the Internet Research Agency is that Russian company or entity from St. Petersburg, and actually Prigozhin was running that operation. And their whole purpose was to flood social media in the United States with all kinds of disinformation to try to divide citizens, voters. And all of these issues were fabricated, by the way. They didn't take real stories. They fabricated them. they would frequently target fabrications that would hit racial hot buttons. You know, I remember seeing in my Facebook page an image of an African American young woman stomping on an American flag. Okay, so trying to trip some triggers with an image like that. But here's the thing. Between 2015 and 17, Americans liked and shared the IRA's Facebook and Instagram pages 31 million times. I want you to think about that. We studied and analyzed all kinds of potential Russian collusion. They didn't come in the back door. They came in through the front door. Now, next slide. Now, there's a lot more awareness about that activity from other countries going on, and there's a lot more federal efforts to try to block those things from happening. But what's happening is that much of the disinformation today is coming from inside our country. And once you have that divide, and there's a perception that, or a reality that the division is profitable for individuals or organizations, then it's understandable that we would see that. Artificial intelligence is going to play a bigger and bigger part in elections starting this year. I mean, back in 2023, there were two issues. One is the mayor's race in Chicago, Paul Hollis. He was a kind of a pro-law enforcement candidate at that time. And there was a radio ad that ran that used his, quote unquote, his voice. And it made statements like, back in my day, policemen could shoot 18 people and nobody would bat an eye. And so the idea of putting something out in a late state to try to influence voters happened in Chicago in this April. There were also ads running in Iowa. These are interesting too. The DeSantis, and it was publicly disclosed, the DeSantis campaign took tweets from Truth Social. Not sure what you call Truth Socials. Anyway, tweets from President Trump, former President Trump. And so they had a quote here about his comments about the governor in Iowa. What they did is they used artificial intelligence to turn that into a recorded message, feeling, perhaps recognizing, that they could get a lot more attention by broadcasting at airwaves than you could by trying to get people to read something. And so they used artificial intelligence in that way. Now think about the potential to just alter some. In fact, they say, well, those are words, right? What's wrong with that? Well, what if you omit some words or alter something? Well, put period where there shouldn't be one. You can change the meaning, and if it's done on artificial intelligence, it could be so subtle, it could make a huge difference in the minds of some people. And there aren't really any election regulations about AI. There are efforts. Congress was looking at it. The social media companies were urging it. The tech companies are urging it, but nothing is going to be ready for 2024. So we have a challenge here, and our public needs to talk about this more and more so that we can be prepared to not have our neighbors or family members fall into this fortunate trap that could occur. Presidential election. Can you imagine where we have a leading Republican candidate leading by far that is under a series of indictments and the uncertainty that will bring when, if, how that may play out in the 2024 election, final election. We also have two candidates, both Trump and Biden, whose unfavorability ratings are higher than their favorability. And so the potential for things to happen because of the politics, the high stakes politics is there. I mean, some people believe that former President Trump believes that the only way out of this legal criminal trap that he may be in is to become elected, which means that puts a lot of pressure somehow making sure that he's elected. And so these are issues of they're in that spaghetti diagram. It's hard to say how it's all going to play out in full, but we should be informed, particularly in states like Wisconsin, who could be right in the middle of something that is affecting the entire country, but the pressure is really being felt here. Okay, so here's some things for you to consider. Because I think we have tools that we need to use and they're important. So first of all, I think it's important for us to seek out like-minded groups and work together. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how this can play out in individual sessions, but essentially, this is a good time to be connecting. There's another organization that we have done some work with, we're not partnered with, called Democracy USA, Secure Democracy USA. And you probably know its Wisconsin leader is Aaron Bruns, who's with the league. And their concern is about the 2024 election as well. They're taking some different approaches. This is good. We should talk about getting connected to all kinds of different groups and organizations to try to become as knowledgeable about what others are doing and potentially use those connections to bring people together or organizations together, if it would. It's important that we have some grown-ups in the room, like the league. The data indicate that we don't trust fact-checking organizations if it's coming from PolitiFact or something, because people don't believe that there isn't some bias in there. But these two websites are useful because they will identify the bias that they're finding and try to educate people, recognizing that all media has some bias. So all sites, basically what they do is they will give you ratings on media organizations. I guess they have 500 plus different organizations that they rate. One of the things that they do that's cool is they will take a story, a national story, and they will give you the conservative version of the story from that media source, the moderate and the liberal version. So you kind of get a 3D view of the same articles. Media Bias Fact Check has this is a global enterprise, and they've got thousands of different media sources that they rate. And they do the same things about rating organizations by those categories on the spectrum. But they also identify satire sites, they identify scientific sites, conspiracy theory sites. And so you can get a lot of good information by just checking something out here. And if local people check things out and they communicate things to other local people, that's the best chance you have of countering this information. Expecting people to go to PolitiFact and buy it or not buy it may not be as effective. It's just being able to know what's going on. Let's go to the next one. And then this is an interesting thing too. So the trust in media, this is a Pew Research study. The blue line is where it was 2 years early, 2016, and the green line is what it was in 2021. And so the categories are national media, local media, and social media. And all areas went down. But here's the thing you need to look at. Local media is still high. Nearly 2/3 of people trust local media. And in fact, the same is true about trust in local government. The trust in Congress is single digits, but the trust in local government is still around that 2/3 level. So when local governments, local media, trusted organizations can collaborate and communicate common messages, it can be very meaningful. And we believe that Leader Ethics has been involved in several of these efforts over the years. We call it community. But here's the goal here is when you can hold an event and it's co-sponsored by those media organizations, It's really good to have WPR and WISM. You want the spectrum. It's also good to have the Chamber of Commerce, the League, Rotary clubs, United Way, basically sharing that with their members. And what happens is you give a sense in the community that, hey, these are my neighbors in these organizations. There's a sense of confidence that this is not bogus, this is legitimate. And whether they attend that event or not, it does this, it takes that misinformation in the area, it takes it down. And that's perhaps the most significant thing you can do. Let's go to the next slide. So I mentioned about this idea of collaborating with like-minded organizations. And you have a wonderful opportunity because you bring in speakers and you can hear about different perspectives. But you know, you don't have to, you can be a collaborator without becoming a formal partner. And a collaboration can mean just putting each other on your newsletters. It can mean having contact information if and when it's needed. And it's not a threat or a burden to do that. Think of it this way. When you look at the challenges that the American Democratic Republic is facing, in my view, it's an onslaught. And now is not the time to be thinking about whose turf we're stepping on us and trying to fight them. We have an onslaught, and we should be finding ways to connect if and whenever we can to try to address that in the best way we can. And so I'm going to stop here and just open it up for whatever questions you might have.
Hi, Lee, thank you. Thank you for your talk. I'm just thinking about the
Do
integrity.
you want to? I want to put you on the microphone so that
I-
our audience can hear you.
We've got people at home who want to hear you too.
What is it?
We've got people at home who want to hear you
Oh,
too.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, fine, thank you.
Thank you, Lee. I just in mind is the integrity of this last election of 2020, that I still feel in my own heart and soul has not been resolved. And I do feel, after listening to lots of different information, speaking about the internet with these machines, Dominion or whatever, Dominican, whatever, and how I just remembering how this Democratic senator from Wyoming said, if anyone thinks that that election of 2020 was legitimate, they're kidding themselves. There was so much interference with this internet, with these Dominion machines or whatever, that they could come in, stop them, change them. I'm just saying, they were saying it. I was like, wow, you know. And then this verification of ballots, send in ballots, no verification. So, and I was speaking to a man from Michigan. He said, Janice, they sent me 3 or 4. He said I could send them all in if I wanted to. There's no verification. But I'm just saying a lot of questions, you know. Thank you.
Well, this is really the heart of it. Catherine here was asked, we've got 132 legislators in Wisconsin. How many believe that the election was stolen? She says, well, probably 5. But when you talk to people from both parties, by the way, you're going to get another version of that. There was a study done on the election results by WIL, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, the conservative legal organization. Clearly a champion for the conservative cause, clearly. And in their audit, by the way, they did a report to the Keep Our Republic Committee, by the way. So we got a real good understanding of the thoroughness of their audit. It was very thorough in general. And they found that there was no election irregularity. There was no fraud that occurred. If it happened, it might be in one or a handful of cases in the entire state. That's what they found. But they said that there were some irregularities that included the way added voting boxes drop boxes were displayed and made available. that the Senator Tech and Civic Life grants that were given out to communities to help with staffing and administering the election, the polls weren't evenly distributed. And so they said that those irregularities were fraud. Now, when you listen to insurance commercials, they tell you over and over again about bundling, don't they? You know, but when you bundle election fraud and irregularities, or what people might say is positioning, whether it's right or wrong, and you call it all fraud, people, the citizens, they hear this. They don't know what the law says you should or shouldn't do. They have their opinion. And by the way, both parties do political positioning. So recognize that happens. That's part of how our democratic republic operates. But when that's packaged as breaking the law and it all kinds fits under that bundle, it's very difficult to kind of change people's. And it's not the 5 people, the elected officials, that's not the problem. It's all the other elected officials that are either silent or they bundle. They give a message to their constituents. Yeah, there was stuff going on that wasn't right. Maybe they used the Will report and say there was fraud. And so then you have a situation that just reinforces the political divide and the breakdown of trust.
Thank you, Lee. My question is kind of a statement kind of question. So I got very involved in politics back in 2008. I was in college. It was Obama was running. I think it was not for. Over the last 15 years, we've made a lot of progress in making sure that people are actually voting. There was a lot of voter apathy for a long time. My concern now is that with indictments and impeachments and all of these things happening, that people are going to start feeling like their vote doesn't matter even more than they may already feel. And so we'll start to see voter numbers decline. What are your thoughts? What can we do? How can we position it to help put that misinformation aside and help people understand that their votes do in fact count?
Thank you. Well, I think one thing is to support the work of Keep Our Republic and give as much factual information that we support out there. So when you do the work you do to getting people registered, your part of your message is how important that we respect the integrity, the very thorough integrity that we have in the process in Wisconsin. And the reason I say the support the work of Keep Our Republic is there is information that you pick up there that you can share in a conversation with people. So one of the questions, this came from my kid. She was basically saying, get asked some tough questions. He said, I trust my local election clerks. I think they do the right job, but I don't know about Madison, Milwaukee. And so, and you can't say that some stuff has never happened in cities. You should know that too. I live in the Chicago area. But Kathy Grenier went down during the primary election and she just was hanging around as a poll watcher. And so she was basically saying, well, they have some differences because their citizens different. So they had some things they had to figure out how to do some things. But she said it was absolutely legit. And having stories like that are critical. Kathy also is adamant about reminding people that every electronic ballot has a paper ballot behind it. And so if they do have a question and they do ask for a recount, it's a verifiable method to make sure everything is counting. So having stories to share, I think, are important. It's like the heavy lifting. It'll happen every election year. There'll be new issues, those big issues that we're dealing with. They'll be constantly pulling away, and you're going to be constantly trying to.
I have a question for you. I'm just curious if the leaders of a particular party in a state like Wisconsin take some egregious action against voter rights, such as such as impeaching a Supreme Court judge before she even gets seated. How can an organization like yours respond without being accused of partisanship?
Well, it's not gonna work for our organization for silent, okay? So when things are not following those principles, you know, we need to bring them out, and we need to point that out. In fact, we have a monthly newsletter called the Ethics Report, and we give out green lights and red flags to try to point out where things are not where they should be, or this individual or these people should get a pat on the back and maybe our support financially or our vote. But I think educating the public is the key. You know, we have to think about the individual voters have the most powerful lever. And I understand that impeachment process is not likely to go through now. There was an announcement yesterday that the Republican leaders that they're going to introduce legislation to adopt a form of the Iowa redistricting model. I don't think the governor's going to sign that, so the issues are not over. But what I think was the key is there were going to be a lot of ads run informing the public about this threat of impeachment. And it would be the lever of people that would have, and the thing that was the reason they're likely to not do that. So I'm not in the political minds of people in mass, so please don't, I don't have all that insight, but I can say that, you know, that's one of the things we can do is we can get public informed here and we can help. And if we do it with other organizations, our message can be pretty powerful. Now, Wisconsin is a state of regions, so we can do the best we can in this region. We hope others can do the best they can in Green Bay and Clare and other regions around too. But you know what? I think if they have good role models, they have the same concerns we have. And so perhaps something to be picked up as well.
Yeah, the strength of your organization is informing and educating. So my question has to do with high school seniors and what kind of strategy. I'm not sure what the civics courses are. I'm ignorant on that. I know I had civics, and it seems that would be to promote voter integrity.
Yeah, thank you.
For our kids.
Thank you for bringing it up. Actually, so we have supported an effort by the Wisconsin Newspaper Association and Wisconsin Elections Commission to develop 4 videos called Elections 101. And they are fast moving, fast paced, 5-6 minutes, and they're aimed at the high school population. But we have work to do to get the word out about those videos. So I've been in contact with the school district across, and they're on board. They're going to distribute them. I'm trying to work with our local CISA to try to get the region to put those, allow those to put out. And if I can get that done, I'll be seeking volunteers from our organization to see if we can reach the other CISAs and try to get the message out to all the schools. You're absolutely right. You have to educate the next generation. But here's the challenge. You know, I saw that one graph about the breakdown of trust that happened since 1987. So I can remember, I was when I was with tech colleges, I chaired the state's tech college legislative committee. In other words, I was involved in all the lobbying. And I can tell you when in the 90s and so on, the legislators were on the floor and they're battling it out, but then afterwards they all end up someplace like the Avenue Bar and they'd be socializing, interacting. And that's verboten today. So I can remember how it could be better, but the young generation has never seen it. They've only seen the nastiness we have now. So that's why we really, really need to reach.
Lee, I have a question here from somebody on Zoom. Their question is, what voting procedure or laws do you consider most important? For instance, drop boxes, free transportation to polls, water and beverages to those waiting in line to vote, having enough polling places.
Well, I think those are things that could maybe make a difference or help, but here's where I think our organization would come from. We really have concerns about the partisan primary model. It's such a disincentive to people who could be working together and actually solving some things. Look what's happening in Congress today. I mean, right now, there is a impeachment investigation because a faction within the House is demanding that, despite the lack of evidence on it. There is something in the House called the Problem Solving Caucus. It's about 60 to 70 members. And these are people that the way they get into caucus is they have to go get someone from the other party to partner with them. So you've got to cross the party line to do that. So you've got a larger group. But they're really holding back. Now, maybe they'll step up with their votes down the road. That's a good question. But they're holding back because they want to be primary. And the former president is threatening to get on a primary issue of anyone that doesn't back that. It's the very far right faction in their efforts here. Think of this. Robert Ross was primary, and he won re-election by about 500 votes. And the person that came in was an unknown and came in late. So when I look at electoral reform, I'd like to see if we can find a way to get around some of those things. Because once you free up the ethical leaders, lots of other things can happen. But we have a big problem.
Other question. I just want.
Thanks, Lee. I'd like to follow up on the final. You know, if support for that is from the state senate. I know that it was proposed as a bipartisan measure. We've had speakers here about that, and a lot of us are following it. I just wonder if you have any insights about it.
I have some. First of all, State Senator Jesse James is agreed to be a champion of Republican State Senator in this next cycle, and they plan to introduce it again, but also it had a hearing, but it was kind of like a hearing that didn't have any kind of vote commitment tied to it a year and a half ago. And so the goal is to try to have a hearing and have a commitment to get it introduced. Right now, they have a postcard campaign, and you can do it electronically to try to get more senators to sign on as sponsors. And I can get some of that information to you after this meeting. We want to get both Democrats and Republicans on board. You need leaders from both parties. If it looks like it's coming from one party, it's not going.
I've been thinking about your starting premise that trust is where we've fallen down. It is so basically important. And then your slide, which showed public media or national news, I think, local news and social media. Social media was the least trusted on that slide. But as one of your previous slides showed, even Russia realized that that's where we form a lot of our gut core feelings about this. Is your group or any of the groups you're working with working anywhere near that problem?
Well, these are huge issues, and the section in the law that protects social media, section 234, is maybe I have the number wrong, but that's been discussed as being changed or altered. There's resistance on that. Actually, the social media companies are not the ones that are objecting. But it's other interests. And essentially, having that section in place means that if somebody says something on social media, you can't sue the company. Right? That's what I said. And they said the whole system collapse. Well, the EU prevents that. And there's a lot of social media in the European Union. So getting information out to people would be one thing. We are bringing in a speaker through Rotary. Leader Ethics is partnering. Katie Harbarth. Katie Harbarth was a senior policy person in the centerpiece of the connection of the algorithms and the politics in Facebook. And then she left Facebook to start her own company. She's been very critical about those practices in Facebook. She'll be here on November 2nd, virtually here on November 2nd. I think what we need to do is help educate more people, more citizenry about why we can need to regulate social media. There needs to be some regulation on artificial intelligence. That takes all of the problems that we saw here and it potentially magnifies them many times over. And it's going to take people just saying, we got to do something and get enough citizens to get on board with it.
I was interested in just more clarity or a definition of the primary alternative of the top five.
So, well, essentially it's two parts. The first part is the partisan primary, and essentially what they're changing is instead of having a Democratic primary, you have to, in other words, you must vote for someone in that party in order to vote, or a Republican. Basically, it's an open primary, and you can vote for any person of any independence, and the top 5 people automatically get put on the general election ballot. And they have adopted this in Alaska. It's called Final Four because it's only the 4 that go forward. But essentially, if you look at what happened in Alaska, they just used it in the last election cycle. Sarah Palin was going to be reelected and at least put into Congress. But a lot of people opposed her. And the top 3 that came out, basically using that ranked choice process, turned out that a Democrat was elected in a Republican state. But a Trump endorsed Republican candidate is governor, and the legislature is now, they've set up a problem solvers caucus to work on their budget. They were able to succeed in this last budget cycle. So if you take away that intense partisanship in primary, you can do a lot of things. And I encourage you to look at the Alaska story. It's a really good one. And they got the same, the Final 5 voting, this came from Catherine Gale and Brooks, the Harvard, and their book that they put out. And they saw the report and they said, we should do this in Alaska. Now, the difference there is they went to the voters to get permission to do that. They have that provision in Wisconsin. We don't. We have to go to the legislature to get that. But it's a great story, and I think it's something that we can happen there. Nevada passed a referendum, which is now going to, if it gets through the second time, it'll become law in Nevada. And their belief is, they got 5 or 6 states to use this model, given the makeup of the House, that basically that would be enough to tilt it from that immovable divide that we have now. You'd have more problem solvers that aren't threatened by the prospect of being primary. It would be enough to make a difference. It's pretty interesting.
Lee, I have another question from someone in the chat room who says, our local newspapers are losing reporters, so I'm losing trust. Is there a way to verify or fact check political messages and ads, including on social media, before they go out instead of after?
Well, we're concerned about that too. Those fact check websites are really useful tools. And the problem with local reporting is another issue, and it's a big one. It's not in our mission, and yet we are doing some things to try to support that. There are several significant national grants out now to try to help nonprofit or collaborative news, local news organizations to develop or enterprises to develop. And we are partnering with a group from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and Wisconsin Watch, and they're going to do some in-depth stories on environmental issues in the upper Mississippi waters and so on. They selected the topic, but they approached us here and to see if we would support that. And there's going to be a meeting at the London Center next Thursday on the 21st by the street. But here's the thing. We could try to apply for grants like that here, but it would need to be the Tribune. It would be really, they would have to really be championing this, but also other media organizations. And I think there would be some interest there. If there was community interest too, that would be a great way to have local in-depth reporting. Now, it's not going to answer all the issues. When I started at Western, I got to tell you, there were board meetings in early 90s. There would be the radio station would be there, at least one of the TV stations, and always a Tribune reporter. This was a routine agenda. There was nothing on it. You know, so what happens? Well, organizations have to watch their piece of juice. You know, people are watching. No one's watching right now, and so it's a huge thing that when you're looking for transparency, it's one of those principles. It's pretty hard when you can't get it enough of it locally where the leverage is greatest.
And I have another question from the chat room, which is, how can our local leagues borrow or buy the videos that you've mentioned?
Oh, their Elections 101 videos, they're free. Just go to the website, the Wisconsin Elections Commission website, Elections 101. You can download them, you can share them. You know, they're fun, entertaining.
I got a question.
Sorry, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you talked about the high school engagement. What roles or tools or anything you have? Just with the college kids, just keeping them engaged. Because we have had good engagement locally and just keeping that.
I'm sorry, did you say apathy?
Well, one of the other questions was about voter apathy.
Yes, how about young people apathy?
Yeah.
You know, it's a concern. It's a huge concern. And I think part of it is because they haven't seen anything other than the world that we're living in. It's pretty easy to be just so turned off, thinking that's just the way it is, and I want to do things. So it's a huge challenge, and we need to get champions that are willing to speak to other young people, and those champions are critical. It's too bad. Leader Ethics there was a student organization at UWL, Students for Ethical Administration, and it came from the students, and they brought in some speakers, and they were doing some things, and then the pandemic hit. And now we're not able to get the champion to come forward to start it up again. But you know, we shouldn't give up, should we? This is too important. So I think if we can bring young people in to this environment or somewhere and have them hear some of these things, but also hear questions about how to get young people involved, perhaps we can try to vote. I know you had a question over there.
Okay, Lee, I don't need a microphone. Two things, I guess. Whatever happened, Lee, to term limits, 1 or 2 terms. I said it's to a couple of these senators. I don't care if you're Republican, I'm a Republican or Democrat. 1 or 2 terms, get out. I'm so sick of this. You know, these, I said Republicans, Democrats, old Pelosi, and Schumer, I mean, Republicans too. I said, get out. What are we doing with this kind of outfit? And number two, what happened, Lee, to, what do you call that, capping on these campaign financing? I mean, what happened to that, Lee? We had like, didn't we have a cap of 150,000 or 250,000? My friend from England says, Janice, they have a cap, 150,000 done for. That you don't have to hear these ads incessantly go on nauseam, months and months, same old, just tearing down fake news, what do you want to call it? It just makes you sick. It's like, why didn't we put a cap again? What happened? Pulled it out.
Okay, so in
Makes me sick.
2010, this US Supreme Court.
Could I just, would you mind just repeating or just
Oh,
summarize
sure.
the question?
Well,
I didn't have the mic there and they
And
can
the
hear.
question was, there were two things. Why don't we have term limits? And what happened to the cap on campaign financing? Let me just answer the term limits first. There are legislators that will support these, others don't and won't because it's job security. If you have term limits, it wouldn't solve all the problems, but there's evidence that if you're not up for reelection at that time, elected officials will be more candid and more willing to work across the aisle. So, so there's reason to believe that it could help. On the campaign finance issue in 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court responded in the Citizens United case, basically saying that corporations are equivalent to citizens, and therefore they are entitled to free speech, and free speech means they can spend money without really virtually any limits. And at that time, it was believed that that was going to significantly favor the Republican Party because they had more corporate donors. What's happened since then is everybody's in the game and everybody's using it without any control. And when you have $30 million spent in Illinois in the governor's race to support a candidate that's so extreme they're not likely to be a candidate for the governor. But essentially, you got all kinds of misuse, and there is a huge influx in dark money. So the only way to change that is through constitution, and that's a lot of heavy lifting. But we're on board with that. I'd encourage you to bring in a speaker from American Promise and talk about campaign finance. There were non-binding votes in Wisconsin, and we add up all of the communities. I think it's like 170 different counties and municipalities voted to endorse a campaign finance amendment. If you look at the people in those municipalities, it's like 61% of the whole population of the state. People want it, but then it has a lot of work to get it to that next step. So I think you'd get a great speaker from that organization.
Thank you.
I want to be sensitive to your time as well. Shall I?
I think we're just about to close it down. I just wanted to one or two closing. And then we'll turn it back over to Jane to close us out. You have mentioned a couple of times the Kathy Bernier session that was in Chippewa County. I just wanted to let people know the Wisconsin Examiner had a great article about that meeting. And it's available online. It gave a great sense of who the panel was, because it was not keep our Republic folks so much as it was local election officials who were addressing questions and clarifying the process. And that's another thing I just want to encourage people. If you have questions about the process where you vote, go see your municipal clerk. All of this is open. You can be there for the tally on election night. You can be there for the public test machines are set up. So go in and get some of your questions answered. If you're concerned, it's public and it's open. So go in and learn more about it. In addition to sessions. And the other thing is, I know we have several questions in the chat room as well as in the room about Final Five voting. That is going to be one of the topics of our October program next month. So we can, it's going to be very topical, and it's going to be a nice deep dive from our executive director at state, Deborah Kronborn. So Lee, you've been terrific. We're going to turn it back over to Jane. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Lee. We really appreciate your presence and your wisdom and information and all the questions. I really am so proud of you all for coming up with so many good questions. So I wanted to just thank you all to the program committee. That is Leslie Wagner, here, Deb Buffton, Deborah Luchin, Barb Soderin at the computer, Karen Call, and Sophia Root. And Sophia Root is a UWL student, so we're happy to have her involved with our work. Thanks to Barry McKnight, the fellow that was making things happen earlier in the public library for the use of the space. Also, some more additional technical people in the background was Robin Schmidt and Mike, her husband, that helped to get our new computer started. As Leslie mentioned, before that, National Voter Registration Day is coming up Tuesday, November 19th. We will be here at the public library from 11 o'clock to 4, and we'll be helping people update their voting registration if they've moved or if they have any questions about whether or not they're registered. So if you want to come see what we do in person, in action, stop in and say hi. And if you know anybody maybe that's moved or something or new to the area, send them our way and we can help them unsort things and get registered. Also this weekend, the Community Voices column in the Tribune is going to be authored by one of our members. It's a good article, gives some background about why national voter registration is so important, particularly in Wisconsin. And that was authored by Barb Roberts, and it should be in Tuesday's paper, Saturday's paper. So we will be back here, Lunch and Learn. The next one will be at the waterfront at 11:30 on second Wednesday of October, the 11th. And the topic again is the League of Women Voters Advocacy toward a more representative state government with Deborah Krohn-Miller, the executive director of the state. You can register and find out more information about this on our website, lwvlacrosse.org. Thank you for coming and enjoy your afternoon.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you.